Hi, everybody. Merry Christmas. And today we're going to do our special Christmas read aloud. And here's our story. Alvin and the Chipmunks presents Merry Christmas, Mr. Carroll. Text by Eugene Coco. Are you ready? Here we go. It was the day before Christmas Eve. Simon and Theodore couldn't wait for school to end so they could start getting ready for Christmas. When the bell rang, they rushed out of school and hopped onto their bikes. Alvin trailed behind. "It was nice of Miss Jackson to give you until Christmas Eve to finish your essay, Alvin," said Theodore. "What's nice about it?" pouted Alvin. "She's making me do my other homework over Christmas vacation." "But Alvin, the assignment was due 3 weeks ago," said Simon. "I've got better things to do. I've got to finish my Christmas list." "Well, I'm going to get started on my Christmas baking as soon as I get home," Theodore said with a smile. "And I'm going to start working on Dave's present. It's a surprise," added Simon. I'll make Santa a list of everything I want for Christmas," said Alvin. "Then I'll mail a copy to Grandma and Grandpa Seville." Alvin got on his bike and zoomed down the street. But he didn't look where he was going. He rode right through Mr. Carroll's garden and sprayed him and his cat Ebenezer with dirt. "Watch where you're going!" Mr. Carroll yelled, and he wiped the dirt from his clothes. "What a grouch," thought Alvin as he opened his front door. "Doesn't that old guy know anything about the Christmas spirit?" "Don't you know anything about the Christmas spirit, Alvin?" "Has anyone seen Alvin?" called Dave a little while later. "I can't find him anywhere." "He's not in the basement," said Simon as he worked on Dave's Christmas surprise. "I haven't seen Alvin either," Theodore called from the kitchen. Just then, a gigantic roll of paper landed at Dave's feet. "What's all this?" asked Dave as he climbed over piles of paper and went into Alvin's room. "It's my Christmas list," said Alvin. "You can finish that some other time," said Dave. "You're late for your paper route." "I'm only halfway through my list. Can Simon or Theodore do it for me?" pleaded Alvin. "Alvin, it's your paper route. You do it." "But if I don't get this list in the mail by 5 o'clock, explained Alvin, Grandma and Grandpa Seville won't have enough time to get me what I want for Christmas." "It will have to wait," said Dave. "Now go." "You heard him, Alvin. Get moving." In no time at all, Alvin was zipping through the neighborhood, tossing papers everywhere. He tossed his last paper, Mr. Carroll's, into the bird bath. It was soaked through and through. "You'll have to get me a dry paper," called Mr. Carroll. "But Mr. Carroll," sighed Alvin, "I don't have the time for that. I have to get my Christmas list in the mail by 5 o'clock. Have my paper here by sundown, or I'm going straight to your father," grumbled Mr. Carroll as Alvin took off on his bike. It took some time, but Alvin found a dry paper and delivered it to Mr. Carroll. Then he hurried home, but it was too late to mail off his Christmas list to Grandma and Grandpa Seville. "It's all Mr. Carroll's fault," cried Alvin. "Now I won't get any presents for Christmas." "But Christmas is a time for giving presents, not getting them," said Dave. Not for me, it isn't," Alvin said with a sigh, and he walked off to his room. Then Alvin remembered that his essay on the true meaning of Christmas was due tomorrow. But Alvin couldn't think of anything to write. "Maybe I'll write about what the true meaning of Christmas isn't," he thought. "I'll write about Mr. Carroll. He doesn't know anything about Christmas." Then Alvin started writing. Soon, he fell asleep. Suddenly, he woke up and saw Dave floating on a cloud. Golly. Who are you? Asked Alvin. I'm the spirit of Christmas past, said Dave. I'm here to show you how Christmas should be. He helped Alvin onto the cloud. They floated through the night. Soon, they came to a small house. That's where we lived when we were little, said Alvin, smiling. Let's take a closer look, said Dave. They landed by the house and looked in the window. Simon, Theodore, and Alvin were little babies. Dave was sitting at the piano unwrapping his Christmas presents, a pencil, a piece of paper, and an eraser. I remember that we didn't have enough money to get you real presents, said Alvin. But they were wonderful, said Dave, because they came from your hearts. It was a great evening. Alvin helped Dave write a Christmas song, Simon hung the lights, and Theodore made popcorn. The next thing Alvin knew, he was back in his room and Dave had disappeared. Suddenly, a pile of toy catalogs moved around on the floor. Out popped Theodore, dressed in a shiny new Santa suit and carrying a large sack. I'm the spirit of Christmas present, said Theodore. What's in the sack? Asked Alvin. Come closer and see, said Theodore. When Alvin looked in the sack, he saw that it was already Christmas Day. He saw poor old Mr. Carroll and Ebenezer. Although Mr. Carroll didn't get any presents, he gave Ebenezer a toy mouse. Mr. Carroll didn't really care about Christmas presents, but he wanted his newspaper. When he went outside to look, it wasn't on the front porch. I guess Alvin was too busy with his own presents to deliver my newspaper, said Mr. Carroll with a sad sigh. I didn't know a newspaper meant that much to Mr. Carroll, Alvin said to Theodore as he looked at the scene. You're just about the only visitor he ever gets, said Theodore. Now I understand more what Dave meant about sharing, added Alvin. Good, smiled Theodore as he began to disappear in a cloud of silvery dust. The spirit of Christmas yet to come will be happy to hear that. Yet to come is just another word for the future. Well, another group of words that means the future. The spirit of Christmas, what? Asked Alvin as a flash of bright light appeared before him. The spirit of Christmas yet to come, came a voice from the light. Alvin couldn't believe his eyes. It was Simon, and he was twinkling and sparkling like a star. I've come here to show you what you'll be like years from now. Simon snapped his fingers, and a video screen appeared on Alvin's desk. Come have a look, said Simon. This is how your Christmas will be in the future. Alvin looked at the screen and saw Theodore cooking Christmas dinner in the kitchen. Then he saw himself running in with a bag full of presents. At last, I'm done with my Christmas shopping, cried Alvin, and all of the presents are for me. As usual, sighed Theodore as he put the last dish on the table. Boy, am I hungry, said Alvin, and he started eating everything in sight. The more Alvin ate, the bigger he got. There's nothing left for Christmas dinner, sobbed Theodore. I left you the Brussels sprouts, said Alvin with a huge grin. Just then, Dave and Simon came in with Grandma and Grandpa Seville. Where are my presents? I want my presents, shouted Alvin, and he knocked Grandma and Grandpa Seville to the ground. They're under the tree, said Dave, and they're all for you. All for me! All for me! Yippee! The presents are all for me! shouted Alvin as he jumped for joy. But the more he jumped, the more the walls shook. Then the ceiling began to crumble and the chimney started to fall down. "The house is falling apart," cried Alvin as he shut off the video screen. "I don't like myself in the future." "I don't like it either, Al. I don't like it either." "Well, you can change that," smiled Simon. "All you have to do is give instead of get. Then everything will be fine." "I'll change," said Alvin. "I promise." Then, in a flash, Simon was gone. Alvin woke up. He finished his essay and got to work on another list. This time, it was a list of presents he planned to give. That's the spirit, Alvin. The next day, Alvin handed in his essay. Miss Jackson said it was the best paper he'd ever done. Then Alvin went shopping. He bought as many presents as he could with the money he had saved. Alvin also made a special trip to Mr. Carroll's house and invited him and Ebenezer over for Christmas dinner. "Merry Christmas, everyone," sang Alvin as he gave out all of his presents. "This is the best Christmas ever." Yes, and it was all made possible thanks to you, Alvin. You learned the true meaning of Christmas. The end. Well, I hope you all learned something from the story, everyone. Christmas isn't about getting, it's about giving. And now, are you ready for our next story? That's right, it's another story, and this one is a classic. How the Grinch Stole Christmas by Dr. Seuss. Are you ready? Here we go. Every Who down in Whoville liked Christmas a lot. But the Grinch, who lived just north of Whoville, did not. The Grinch hated Christmas, the whole Christmas season. Now please don't ask why. No one quite knows the reason. It could be his head wasn't screwed on just right. It could be perhaps that his shoes were too tight. But I think the most likely reason of all may have been that his heart was 2 sizes too small. My goodness. But whatever the reason, his heart or his shoes, he stood there on Christmas Eve, hating the Whos, staring down from his cave with a sour, grinchy frown at the warm-lighted windows below in their town, for he knew every Who down in Whoville beneath was busy now hanging a mistletoe wreath. "And they're hanging their stockings," he snarled with a sneer. "Tomorrow is Christmas. It's practically here." Then he growled with his Grinch fingers nervously drumming, "I must find some way to stop Christmas from coming." What? Stop Christmas from coming? That's the silliest thing I've ever heard. For tomorrow, he knew, all the Who girls and boys would wake bright and early. They'd rush for their toys. And then, oh, the noise, noise. That's one thing he hated. The noise. Then the Whos, young and old, would sit down to a feast. And they'd feast, and they'd feast, and they'd feast. They would feast on Who pudding and rare Who roast beast, which was something the Grinch couldn't stand in the least. And then they'd do something he liked least of all. Every Who down in Whoville, the tall and the small, would stand close together with Christmas bells ringing. They'd stand hand in hand, and the Whos would start singing. They'd sing, and they'd sing, and they'd sing. And the more the Grinch thought of this Who Christmas Sing, the more the Grinch thought, I must stop this whole thing. Why, for 53 years, I've put up with it now. I must stop this Christmas from coming. But how? Then he got an idea. An awful idea. The Grinch got a wonderful, awful idea. Oh, I don't think I like what his idea is going to be. Let's turn the next page and then we will see. I know just what to do, the Grinch laughed in his throat. And he made a quick Santa Claus hat and a coat. And he chuckled and clucked. What a great Grinchy trick! With this coat and this hat, I look just like Saint Nick. All I need is a reindeer. The Grinch looked around, but since reindeer are scarce, there was none to be found. Did that stop the old Grinch? No, the Grinch simply said, if I can't find a reindeer, I'll make one instead. So he called his dog Max, and then he took some red thread, and he tied a big horn on the top of his head. Then he loaded some bags and some old empty sacks on a ramshackle sleigh, and he hitched up old Max. Then the Grinch yelled, "Get up!" And the sleigh started down toward the homes where the Who's lay a snooze in their town. Gee whiz. All the windows were dark, quiet snow filled the air. All the Who's were all dreaming sweet dreams without care when he came to the first little house on the square. This is stop number 1, the old Grinchy Claus hissed, and he climbed to the roof, empty bags in his fist. Then he slid down the chimney, a rather tight pinch, but if Santa could do it, then so could the Grinch. He got stuck only once for a moment or two. Then he stuck his head out of the fireplace flue, where the little Who stockings all hung in a row. These stockings, he grinned, are the first things to go. Gosh, he really is mean. Then he slithered and slunk with a smile most unpleasant around the whole room, and he took every present. Pop guns and bicycles, roller skates, drums, checkerboards, tricycles, popcorn, and plums. And he stuffed them in bags. Then the Grinch, very nimbly, stuffed all the bags one by one up the chimbley. Golly. Seriously, is he really going to do this? He is. Then he slunk to the icebox. He took the Who's feast. He took the Who pudding. He took the roast beast. He cleaned out that icebox as quick as a flash. Why, that Grinch even took their last can of Who hash. That is messed up, Grinch. I mean, that's theft, you know. You could get arrested for that sort of thing. So remember, everybody, never steal, because stealing is wrong. I mean, you could end up in jail or juvenile detention for that. So take my advice. Do not steal. Then he stuffed all the food up the chimney with glee. And now, grinned the Grinch, I will stuff up the tree. Whoa, 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 whoa. You're seriously going to stuff that whole tree up the chimney? Grinch, you're crazy. Seriously, I'm just going to go ahead and say it right now. You are crazy. And the Grinch grabbed the tree and he started to shove when he heard a small sound like the coo of a dove. He turned around fast and he saw a small Who, little Cindy Lou who was not more than 2. The Grinch had been caught by this tiny Who daughter who'd gotten out of bed for a cup of cold water. She stared at the Grinch and said, Santa Claus, why? Why are you taking our Christmas tree? Why? But you know, that old Grinch was smart. Well, he was so smart and so slick. He thought up a lie, and he thought it up quick. Why, my sweet little tot, the fake Santa Claus lied. There's a light on this tree that won't light on one side. So I'm taking it home to my workshop, my dear. I'll fix it up there, then I'll bring it back here. Lying to a child? You ought to be ashamed of yourself, Grinch. And his fib fooled the child. Then he patted her head. And he got her a drink and then sent her to bed. And when Cindy Lou Who went to bed with her cup, he went to the chimney and stuffed the tree up. Whoa. He really did it. Then the last thing he took was the log for their fire. Then he went up the chimney himself, the old liar. On their walls he left nothing but hooks and some wire. And the one speck of food that he left in the house was a crumb that was even too small for a mouse. Then he did the same thing to the other Who's houses, leaving crumbs much too small for the other Who's mouses. It was 1/4 dawn, all the Who's still abed, all the Who's still a snooze when he packed up his sled. Packed it up with their presents, the ribbons, the wrappings, the tags and the tinsel, the trimmings, the trappings. Gosh, he really did it. He stole all their Christmas stuff. 3,000 feet up the side of Mount Crumpet, he rode with his load to the tip top to dump it. Pooh, pooh to the Who's, he was grinchishly humming. They're finding out now that no Christmas is coming. They're just waking up. I know just what they'll do. Their mouths will hang open for a minute or two. Then the Who's down in Whoville will all cry, boo-hoo. That's a noise, grinned the Grinch, that I simply must hear. So he paused, and the Grinch put his hand to his ear. And he did hear a sound rising over the snow. It started in low, then it started to grow. But the sound wasn't sad. Why, this sound sounded merry. It couldn't be so. But it was merry. Very. He stared down at Whoville. The Grinch popped his eyes. Then he shook. What he saw was a shocking surprise. Every Who down in Whoville, the tall and the small, was singing without any presents at all. He hadn't stopped Christmas from coming. It came. Somehow or the other, it came just the same. See, you can't stop Christmas from coming. No matter what you do, it will come. And the Grinch, with his Grinch feet ice cold in the snow, stood puzzling and puzzling. How could it be so? It came without ribbons. It came without tags. It came without packages, boxes, or bags. And he puzzled 3 hours till his puzzler was sore. Then the Grinch thought of something he hadn't before. Maybe Christmas, he thought, doesn't come from a store. Maybe Christmas, perhaps, means a little bit more. And what happened then? Well, in Whoville, they say that the Grinch's small heart grew 3 sizes that day. And the minute his heart didn't feel quite so tight, he whizzed with his load through the bright morning light. And he brought back the toys and the food for the feast. And he himself, the Grinch, carved the roast beast. And that, everyone, is how this story ends. The Grinch has now made a lot of new friends. And I must end this one with a message that's true. The best Christmas gift you can give someone is you. And now for the last story of all. That's right. It's a triple Christmas read aloud, just like last year. The Crippled Lamb by Max Lucado with Jenna, Andrea, and Sarah Lucado. Illustrated by Liz Bonham. Are you ready? Here we go. Once upon a time, in a sunny valley, there lived a little lamb named Joshua. He was white with black spots, black feet, and sad eyes. Oh dear. Josh felt sad when he saw the other lambs with snow-white wool and no spots. He felt sad when he saw the other sheep with their moms and dads because he didn't have a mom or dad. It's true, his parents have both passed away. But he felt saddest when he saw the other lambs running and jumping because he couldn't. Josh had been born with one leg that didn't work right. He was crippled. He always limped when he walked. Oh, gee, that's really sad. That's why he always watched while the other lambs ran and played. Josh felt sad and alone, except when Abigail was around. Abigail was Josh's best friend. She didn't look like a friend for a lamb. She was an old cow. She was brown with white blotches that looked like rain puddles on a path. Her belly was as round as a barrel, and her voice was always kind and friendly. Some of Josh's favorite hours were spent with Abigail. They loved to pretend they were on adventures in distant lands. Josh liked to listen to Abigail tell stories about the stars. They would spend hours on the hill looking into the valley. They were good friends. But even with a friend like Abigail, Josh still got sad. It made him sad to be the only lamb who could not run and jump and play in the grass. That's when Abigail would turn to him and say, "Don't be sad, little Joshua. God has a special place for those who feel left out." Josh wanted to believe her, but it was hard. Some days he just felt alone. He really felt alone the day the shepherds decided to take the lambs to the next valley, where there was more grass. The sheep had been in this valley so long, the ground was nearly bare. All the sheep were excited when the shepherd told them they were going to a new meadow. As they prepared to leave, Josh hobbled over and took his place on the edge of the group. But the others started laughing at him. "You're too slow to go all the way to the next valley." "Go back, slowpoke. We'll never get there if we have to wait on you." "Go back, Joshua." Well, that's not very nice. That's when Josh looked up and saw the shepherd standing in front of him. "They are right, my little Joshua. You better go back. This trip is too long for you. Go and spend the night in the stable." Josh looked at the man for a long time. Then he turned slowly and began limping away. Oh, poor Joshua. I know how it feels. I don't like being left out either. It just makes me feel so sad. Anyway, when Josh got to the top of the hill, he looked down and saw all the other sheep headed toward the green grass. Never before had he felt so left out. A big tear slipped out of his eye, rolled down his nose, and fell on a rock. Just then, he heard Abigail behind him, and Abigail said what she always said when Josh felt sad. "Don't be sad, little Joshua. God God has a special place for those who feel left out. Slowly, the two friends turned and walked to the stable together. By the time they got to the little barn, the sun was setting like a big orange ball. Josh and Abigail went inside and began to eat some hay out of the feed box. They were very hungry, and the hay tasted good. For a little while, Joshua forgot that he had been left behind. "Go to sleep, little friend," Abigail said after they finished eating. "You've had a hard day." Josh was tired, so he lay in the corner on some straw and closed his eyes. He felt Abigail lie down beside him, and he was glad to have Abigail as a friend. Yeah, if I had a friend like Abigail, I'd be a happy fellow. Soon, Josh was asleep. At first, he slept soundly, curled up against Abigail's back. In his sleep, he dreamed. He dreamed of running and jumping like the other sheep. He dreamed of long walks with Abigail through the valley. He dreamed of being in a place where he never felt left out. Suddenly, strange noises woke him up. "Abigail," he whispered. "Wake up. I'm scared." Abigail lifted her big head and looked around. The stable was dark except for a small lamp hanging on the wall. "Somebody is in here," Josh whispered. They looked across the dimly lighted stable. There, lying on some fresh hay in the feed box, was a baby. A young woman was resting on a big pile of hay beside the feed box. Joshua looked at Abigail, thinking his friend could tell him what was going on. But Abigail was just as surprised as Josh. I'd be surprised too. A baby in a feed box? Who could this child be? Josh looked again at the woman and the child. Then he limped across the stable. He stopped next to the mother and looked into the baby's face. The baby was crying. He was cold. The woman picked up the baby and put him on the hay next to her. Josh looked around the stable for something to keep the baby warm. Usually there were blankets, but not tonight. The shepherds had taken them on their trip across the valley. Then Josh remembered his own soft, warm wool. Timidly, he walked over and curled up close to the baby. "Thank you, little lamb," the baby's mother said softly. About that time, a man entered the stable carrying some rags. "I'm sorry, Mary," he explained. "This is all the cover I could find." "It's okay," she answered. "This little lamb has kept the new king warm." "A king?" Joshua looked at the baby and wondered who he might be. "His name is Jesus," Mary spoke, as if she knew Josh's question. "God's son. He came from heaven to teach us about God." Just then, there was another noise at the door. It was the shepherds, the ones who had left Joshua behind. Their eyes were big and they were excited. "We saw a bright light and heard the angels," they began. Then they saw Joshua next to the baby. "Joshua, do you know who this baby is?" He does now. It was the young mother who was speaking. She looked at Joshua and smiled. "God has heard your prayers, little lamb. This little baby is the answer." Joshua looked down at the baby. Somehow he knew this was a special child, and this was a special moment. He also understood why he had been born with a crippled leg. Had he been like the other sheep, he would have been in the valley. But since he was different, he was in the stable, among the first to welcome Jesus into the world. He turned and walked back to Abigail and took his place beside his friend. "You were right," he told her. "God does have a special place for me." The end. So remember, my friends, If you ever feel left out, God has a special place for you. He has a special place for everyone in this world. And today is the day we celebrate that King Jesus was born in a humble stable. And what was your favorite part of each of these stories? Let me know in the comments below. Until then, I hope you have a Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, Happy Kwanzaa, and a Happy New Year. See you later. Happy holidays. Bye.